Maria Rodriguez had been walking for 3 days straight, her worn-out sneakers barely holding together as she trudged along the dusty Texas highway. At 17 years old, she carried everything she owned in a small backpack that had seen better days. Her stomach cramped with hunger, and her lips were cracked from thirst under the relentless desert sun. She had escaped from her foster home in Phoenix after her foster father had tried to hurt her one too many times. The social workers wouldn't believe her story, and she couldn't take another night of fear and abuse. With only $47 to her name, Maria had bought a bus ticket that took her as far as her money would stretch, which landed her in the middle of nowhere, Texas. The last of her money had gone to a small bottle of water and a candy bar 2 days ago. Since then, she had been surviving on rainwater she collected in her empty bottle and wild berries she found. Along the roadside, Maria knew she was taking a risk eating plants she couldn't identify. But starvation was a more immediate threat than possible poisoning. As the sun began to set on her 3rd day of walking, Maria's legs finally gave out. She collapsed beside a weathered fence post, too weak and exhausted to take another step. The vast Texas landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, with no sign of civilization anywhere. She had seen only 2 cars pass by in the entire day, and both had ignored her desperate waves for help. Maria closed her eyes and tried not to think about how thirsty she was. Her tongue felt swollen and sticky, and her head pounded with dehydration. She had read somewhere that a person could survive about 3 weeks without food, but only 3 days without water. By her calculations, she was pushing the limits of human survival. The teenager pulled out her phone, but as expected, there was no signal. She had been checking obsessively for the past 2 days, hoping to find even one bar that might allow her to call for help. But this remote stretch of highway seemed to exist in a cellular dead zone, cutting her off from any chance of reaching the outside world. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped dramatically. Maria hugged her thin jacket around her body, but it provided little warmth against the cold desert night. She had learned the hard way that the desert could be scorching hot during the day and freezing cold at night, and she was unprepared for either extreme. Wild animals howled in the distance, their eerie calls echoing across the empty landscape. Maria had grown up in the city and knew nothing about surviving in the wilderness. Every sound made her jump. She found herself constantly looking over her shoulder for predators that might see her as an easy target. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by hunger pangs, thirst, and the sounds of the desert at night. Maria dreamed of her childhood before the foster system, when her grandmother would make her favorite meals, and she felt safe and loved. But those memories seemed like they belonged to someone else's life now. When dawn broke on the 4th day, Maria knew she was in serious trouble. She could barely stand, and her vision was becoming blurry. The smart thing would have been to stay put and wait for help, but no cars had passed in over 12 hours. If she was going to survive, she had to keep moving and hope to find water, or civilization before her body completely shut down. Maria struggled to her feet and began walking again, but her pace was much slower than before. Every step was an effort, and she had to stop frequently to rest. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and she knew that the heat would soon become unbearable again. About 2 miles down the road, Maria spotted something that made her heart leap with hope. In the distance, she could see a dirt road leading away from the highway toward what looked like ranch buildings. It was the first sign of human habitation she had seen in days. Summoning her last reserves of strength, Maria left the main highway and started walking down the dirt road. The ranch buildings were farther away than they had appeared, and with each step, she felt her energy draining away. But the possibility of finding help drove her forward, even as her body begged her to stop. The dirt road seemed to stretch on forever. Winding through scrubland and past scattered cattle, Maria had never seen so many cows in one place, and she took it as a good sign that someone must live and work nearby. Surely whoever owned this ranch would help a desperate teenager who was clearly in trouble. As she got closer to the main ranch house, Maria could see that it was a large, well-maintained property with several outbuildings and corrals. Horses grazed in a nearby pasture, and she could hear the sound of machinery coming from one of the barns. This was obviously a working ranch with people who might be able to help her, But just as the ranch house came into clear view, Maria's body finally gave up. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed in the middle of the dirt road, too weak to take another step. The world spun around her, and dark spots danced in her vision. She tried to call out for help, but her voice was nothing more than a hoarse whisper. Maria lay in the dust, watching the sky wheel overhead as consciousness slipped away from her. Her last thought before everything went black was that she had come so close to reaching safety, only to fall short when help was almost within reach. The 17-year-old had no way of knowing that her collapse had been witnessed, or that her life was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. Sometimes rescue comes when we least expect it, and sometimes the people who save us become the family we never knew we needed. Jake Sullivan was checking the water levels in the cattle troughs when he saw the figure collapse on his dirt road. At 55 years old, the rancher had excellent eyesight despite spending decades squinting against the Texas sun, and he immediately knew that someone was in serious trouble. Jake had been running the Double S Ranch by himself for the past 10 years. Ever since his wife Margaret had passed away from cancer, the 2,000-acre spread had been in his family for 3 generations, and he knew every inch of the property like the back of his weathered hands. It was unusual for strangers to wander onto his land, especially on foot and in such obvious distress. He quickly climbed into his pickup truck and raced down the road toward where he had seen the person fall. As he got closer, Jake could see it was a young girl, probably still a teenager, lying motionless in the dirt. Her clothes were filthy and torn, and even from a distance, he could tell she was severely dehydrated and malnourished. Jake pulled the truck up beside the collapsed girl and jumped out, his heart racing with concern. He had raised 2 daughters of his own, and his paternal instincts kicked in immediately. The girl was unconscious, but she was still breathing, which was a good sign. Her lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration, and her skin was burned red from sun exposure. "Hey there, sweetheart, can you hear me?" Jake said gently as he knelt beside her. He checked her pulse and found it rapid and weak. Her skin was hot and dry, classic signs of severe dehydration and heat exhaustion. Jake knew that every minute counted in a situation like this. He carefully lifted the girl into his arms, surprised by how light she was. She couldn't weigh more than 90 pounds, and he could feel her ribs through her thin shirt. Jake had seen enough injured animals over the years to recognize the signs of prolonged starvation. And this girl was clearly in a critical state. Jake drove as quickly as he dared back to the ranch house, trying to avoid the worst bumps in the road that might jostle his unconscious passenger. He called out to his ranch foreman, Carlos, who came running from the barn when he heard the urgency in Jake's voice. "Carlos, help me get her into the house," Jake ordered. "Then call Doc Martinez and tell him we have an emergency." "Wait. This girl is in bad shape." Together, they carried Maria into the ranch house and laid her on the couch in Jake's living room. Jake immediately went to work, drawing on his experience treating injured animals and the basic first aid training he had received. Years ago, when he served as a volunteer firefighter, he started by trying to get some water into her system, using a dropper to place small amounts of liquid between her cracked lips. Much too fast could make her sick, but she desperately needed hydration. Jake also applied cool, damp cloths to her forehead and wrists to help bring down her body temperature. Dr. Martinez arrived within 30 minutes, carrying his medical bag and asking questions about how Jake had found the girl. The elderly doctor had been serving the rural community for over 40 years, and he had seen his share of heat stroke and dehydration cases. "She's severely malnourished and dehydrated," Dr. Martinez confirmed after examining Maria. "I'm going to start an IV to get fluids into her system, but she really should be in a hospital. The nearest one is 2 hours away, though, and I'm not sure she's stable enough for transport right now." Jake made the decision to keep Maria at the ranch for the time being. His house had everything needed to care for her, and Dr. Martinez agreed to check on her regularly until she was strong enough to be moved. They set up the guest bedroom with medical supplies and monitoring equipment that the doctor brought from his clinic. For the next 24 hours, Maria drifted in and out of consciousness. Jake barely left her side, checking her vital signs. every few hours and making sure she was getting enough fluids. He had to feed her ice chips and small sips of electrolyte solution, being careful not to overwhelm her system. During her brief periods of wakefulness, Maria was confused and disoriented. She would mumble incoherently and try to get out of bed, but Jake would gently reassure her that she was safe and needed to rest. He could see the fear in her eyes when she looked at him, and he wondered what had happened to make such a young girl so terrified of adults. Jake found himself staying up all night, watching over Maria like he had once watched over his own daughters when they were sick. There was something about this mysterious girl that tugged at his heart. Maybe it was her obvious vulnerability. Or maybe it was the way she reminded him of his youngest daughter Sarah at the same age. On the second day, Maria was finally alert enough to have a conversation. She woke up to find Jake sitting in a chair, beside her bed reading a ranching magazine. When their eyes met, she instinctively pulled the covers up to her chin and pressed herself against the headboard. "It's okay," Jake said softly, setting down his magazine and raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe here. My name is Jake Sullivan, and this is my ranch. I found you collapsed on my road 2 days ago." Maria stared at him warily, trying to assess whether he was a threat. She had learned the hard way not to trust adults, especially men. But something in Jake's kind eyes and gentle manner made her feel like maybe she could let her guard down just a little. "Where am I?" Maria asked, her voice still hoarse from dehydration. "You're at the Double S Ranch in West Texas," Jake replied. "You were in pretty bad shape when I found you. Doc Martinez has been taking care of you, and you're going to be just fine, but you need to rest and get your strength back." Maria nodded, still not entirely trusting, but too weak to do anything but accept his help. She noticed that her clothes had been changed into clean pajamas, and she wondered who had done that. Reading the concern in her eyes, Jake quickly explained, "Neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez came over to help get you cleaned up and changed," he said. "I stayed out of the room. Don't worry. She said you were burning up with fever and needed to get out of those dirty clothes." The mention of Mrs. Rodriguez sharing her last name made Maria feel a little more comfortable. At least there had been another woman involved in her care, which eased some of her anxiety about being alone with a strange man. "How long have I been here?" Maria asked. 2 days, Jake replied. "You're unconscious for most of that time. Can you tell me your name? And how you ended up walking alone on a highway in the middle of nowhere?" Maria hesitated, unsure how much she should reveal. Her experience with adults in authority had taught her to be cautious about sharing personal information. But Jake's concerned expression and the fact that he had obviously saved her life made her want to trust him at least a little bit. "My name is Maria," she said quietly, deciding to share at least that much information. "Maria Rodriguez. I'm 17. Jake nodded encouragingly, sensing that there was much more to her story but not wanting to push too hard too soon. "Well, Maria Rodriguez, you gave me quite a scare when I found you collapsed in my driveway. Can you tell me where you were trying to get to? Do you have family we should call?" The question brought tears to Maria's eyes, and she turned her face toward the window to hide her emotion. Family was a complicated subject for her. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 12, and she had been bounced around the foster care system ever since. The word family brought up more pain than comfort. "I don't really have family," Maria said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was just trying to get away from a bad situation. I didn't have anywhere specific to go." Jake felt his heart clench at the sadness in her voice. He had dealt with enough runaway teenagers over the years to recognize the signs of someone fleeing from abuse or neglect. His own daughters had brought home friends who were dealing with difficult home situations, and he had always tried to provide a safe haven when needed. "Well, you're safe here for as long as you need to be," Jake said firmly. "Nobody's going to hurt you on my ranch. When you're feeling stronger, we can talk about what comes next. Right now, your job is just to get better." Over the following week, Maria slowly regained her strength under Jake's careful care. He made sure she had nutritious meals, plenty of fluids, and lots of rest. Dr. Martinez visited every other day to check on her progress. He was amazed by how quickly she was recovering with proper care and attention. Jake was a natural caregiver, having helped raise his own daughters and taken care of his wife during her long battle with cancer. He seemed to instinctively know what Maria needed, whether it was an extra blanket when she was cold, or a quiet presence when she had nightmares about her past experiences. As Maria got stronger, she began to venture out of the bedroom and explore the ranch house. It was a large, comfortable home with high ceilings, hardwood floors, and walls covered with family photographs. Maria found herself drawn to the pictures of Jake's family, studying the faces of his wife and daughters in happier times. "That's my Margaret," Jake said one day, finding Maria looking at a wedding photo on the mantelpiece. "She passed away 10 years ago. Cancer. And those are my girls. Sarah and Emma, they're both grown up now with families of their own." Maria could see the love and pain in Jake's eyes when he talked about his family. She understood the feeling of missing people who were no longer in your life, though her losses had been different from his. "They look happy," Maria said softly, studying the family photos. "You must miss them a lot." "Every day," Jake admitted. "But having you here has reminded me what it feels like to have someone to take care of again. I'd forgotten how much I missed that." As Maria continued to recover, she began to help with small tasks around the house. She insisted on doing her own laundry and cleaning her room, and eventually, she started helping Jake with meal preparation. Cooking together became one of their favorite activities, and Jake was impressed by Maria's natural ability in the kitchen. "My grandmother taught me to cook," Maria explained one afternoon, as she expertly seasoned a pot of beans. "Before she died and I went into foster care, she used to say that a person who can cook will never go hungry." I guess she was wrong about that. Jake could hear the bitterness in her voice when she mentioned foster care, and he was beginning to piece together the story of what had brought her to his ranch. He had contacted social services to report finding a runaway teenager, but he had been vague about the details. Wanting to hear Maria's full story before involving outside authorities, one evening, as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset, Maria finally opened up about her past. She told Jake about losing her parents, the series of foster homes, and finally the situation that had forced her to run away. Jake listened without judgment, his anger growing with each detail of the abuse and neglect she had endured. "You did the right thing by leaving," Jake said when she finished her story. "No kid should have to put up with that kind of treatment. But running away on foot across the desert could have killed you. You're lucky I found you when I did." "I didn't know what else to do," Maria said, tears streaming down her face. "Nobody ever believed me when I tried to tell them what was happening. The social workers said I was a troublemaker who made up stories to get attention." Jake reached over and patted her shoulder gently, the gesture both comforting and respectful of her boundaries. "I believe you, Maria, and I want you to know that you have a place here for as long as you need it. This ranch has been in my family for 3 generations, and there's always room for one more." Maria looked at him with surprise and hope. "You mean I can stay, even though I'm not really family?" "Family isn't just about blood," Jake said with a smile. "Sometimes the people who matter most are the ones who choose to love and care for each other. You've already become part of this place, Maria. I can't imagine it without you now." The conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Maria began to relax and show more of her personality, revealing a sharp wit and a generous heart that had been hidden beneath layers of trauma and fear. She started venturing out to help with ranch chores, eager to contribute something meaningful in return for Jake's kindness. Jake taught her how to care for the horses, showing her how to brush them down and check their hooves for problems. Maria had never been around large animals before, but she had a natural gentleness that the horses responded to immediately. Her favorite was a gentle mare named Star, who seemed to sense that Maria needed extra patience and understanding. Animals have a way of knowing when someone has a good heart. Jake observed one day as he watched Maria feeding Star an apple. "Star was my wife's horse, and she hasn't let anyone get close to her since Margaret died. But she took to you right away." Maria felt a warm glow of pride at Jake's words. For the first time in years, she was in a place where she felt valued and appreciated. The ranch was becoming home in a way that none of her foster placements ever had. And Jake was becoming the father figure she had been missing since her parents died. But even as Maria began to hope for a permanent place in Jake's life, she couldn't shake the worry that social services would eventually track her down and force her to return to the foster system. The thought of leaving the ranch in Jake's protection filled her with dread, and she knew that her new happiness was still fragile and uncertain. 3 weeks after Maria's arrival at the ranch, her worst fears came true. A social worker named Mrs. Patterson arrived unannounced, accompanied by a sheriff's deputy, looking for the runaway teenager who had been reported missing from her foster home in Phoenix. Maria was in the barn helping Jake repair a broken stall door when Carlos came running to tell them about the visitors. Her face went white with terror, and she instinctively moved closer to Jake, seeking his protection. "It's going to be okay," Jake said quietly, though he felt his own anxiety rising. "I won't let them take you anywhere you don't want to go. We need to handle this carefully and legally." Jake walked to the house with Maria beside him, his mind racing as he tried to figure out the best way to protect her. He had been expecting this day to come, and he had already consulted with a family lawyer about the possibility of becoming Maria's legal guardian. But he hadn't expected social services to show up so soon. Mrs. Patterson was a stern woman in her 40s who looked like she had dealt with countless runaway cases and had little patience for complications. She introduced herself curtly and got straight to the point. "Mr. Sullivan, we understand you've been harboring a runaway minor named Maria Rodriguez. We need to take her back to Phoenix immediately to return her to her assigned foster placement." "Hold on just a minute," Jake said firmly, his protective instincts fully activated. "This girl was nearly dead from dehydration and starvation when I found her. She was running away from an abusive situation, and I'm not about to hand her over. 2 people who failed to protect her in the first place." Mrs. Patterson looked annoyed by Jake's interference. "Mr. Sullivan, I understand your concern, but Maria is a ward of the state, and we have procedures that must be followed. Her foster parents are worried about her and want her back home." "Foster father tried to assault her," Jake said, his voice rising with anger. "That's why she ran away. How can you even think about sending her back there?" "Those allegations were investigated and found to be unsubstantiated," Mrs. Patterson replied coldly. "Maria has a history of making false accusations against her placements. She's a troubled teenager who needs structure and professional intervention." Maria felt her heart sink as she listened to the familiar accusations. This was exactly what had happened every time she had tried to report abuse. The adults automatically assumed she was lying, and her abuser's word was taken over hers. Jake looked at Maria's devastated expression and felt his anger reach a boiling point. "Lady, I don't know what kind of investigation you people did. I can tell you that this girl isn't manipulative or troubled. She's been through hell, and all she needs is someone who cares about her well-being." The sheriff's deputy, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "Mr. Sullivan, I understand your concerns, but we have legal custody orders. The girl needs to come with us today." Jake knew he was fighting a losing battle without legal standing, but he wasn't ready to give up. "I want to speak to my lawyer before anyone goes anywhere. Maria's a minor, and she has rights. You can't just drag her back to an abusive situation without due process." Mrs. Patterson sighed with irritation. "Mr. Sullivan, you're making this much more complicated than it needs to be. Maria, get your things. We're leaving in 10 minutes. Maria looked desperately at Jake, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't let them take me," she whispered. "I can't go back there. I'd rather die than go back to that house." Asha. Jake's heart broke at the terror in her voice. He pulled out his cell phone and called his lawyer, Tom Harrison, who had helped him with ranch business for years. Jake quickly explained the situation and asked if there was anything that could be done to delay Maria's removal. "Jake, without legal guardianship papers, your hands are tied," Tom said. "But I can try to get an emergency hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. In the meantime, you'll have to let them take her. But make sure you document everything and get contact information for where she's going." Jake felt defeated, but he knew he had to try a different approach. "Mrs. Patterson, what if I were to file for legal guardianship of Maria? Would that change anything?" The social worker looked surprised by the suggestion. "Guardianship is a lengthy legal process, Mr. Sullivan. It requires background checks, home studies, and court approval. Even if you started the process today, it would take months to complete." "But would it allow Maria to stay here during the process?" Jake pressed. "Possibly, if the court agreed to it, and if Maria's current placement is willing to release custody. Temporarily, Mrs. Patterson admitted reluctantly. Jake could see a glimmer of hope, but he knew time was running out. Maria, I need you to trust me one more time. I'm going to do everything in my power to get you back. Here legally, but you might have to go with them for a few days while I get the paperwork sorted out. Maria felt like her world was collapsing, but she could see the determination in Jake's eyes. He had already saved her life once, and she had to believe that he would find a way to save her again. I trust you, Maria said quietly.
Oh.
But please, hurry. I don't think I can survive going back to that place. Jake walked Maria to her room and helped her pack the few belongings she had acquired during her stay at the ranch. He slipped her his business card with all his contact information and promised to call her every day until he could bring her home. This isn't goodbye, Jake said, as they loaded her small bag into the social worker's car. This is just a temporary setback. I'm going to fight for you, Maria, and I don't give up easily. Maria hugged Jake tightly, not wanting to let go of the first person who had made her feel safe in years. "Q for everything," she whispered. "You've been more of a father to me in 3 weeks than anyone has been in 5 years." Jake watched the car drive away with a heavy heart, but his sadness quickly transformed into determination. He had found a daughter in the desert, and he wasn't about to lose her to a broken system that had already failed her so many times. The next morning, Jake was at his lawyer's office bright and early, ready to begin the legal battle of his life. Tom Harrison had already started researching guardianship laws and preparing the necessary paperwork to challenge Maria's placement. "Jake, this isn't going to be easy," Tom warned him. "The state is generally reluctant to remove children from the foster system and place them with individuals who haven't been through their screening process. And Maria's history of placement disruptions will work against you. I don't care how difficult it is," Jake replied firmly. "That girl saved my life just as much as I saved hers. She brought joy and purpose back into my world, and I'm not about to abandon her when she needs me most." Tom could see the fierce determination in his client's eyes, and he knew that Jake Sullivan was not a man who gave up easily. "All right, then, let's get to work. We're going to need character references, financial statements, and a comprehensive plan for Maria's care and education." Jake spent the entire day gathering the required documentation while Tom began the legal process of challenging Maria's current placement. They filed emergency motions requesting immediate removal from the foster home based on allegations of abuse. And they petitioned the court to allow Maria to return to the ranch pending resolution of the guardianship case. Meanwhile, Maria was suffering through what felt like the longest day of her life back at the foster home in Phoenix. Her foster father's angry glares made it clear that he wasn't happy about her return, and she spent most of the day hiding in her room, afraid to venture out even for meals. True to his promise, Jake called that evening, and the sound of his voice gave Maria the strength to get through another night. He assured her that he was fighting for her and that everything would be okay, even though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. Jake Sullivan had less than a week to prepare for the emergency hearing. It wasn't his first crisis years ago. He'd fought tooth and nail to save his ranch during the drought, but this was different. This was about Maria. Jake spent every waking hour building his case for guardianship. He gathered statements from anyone who had seen the transformation in Maria. Dr. Martinez detailed her condition when she arrived and her steady recovery. Ranch hands like Carlos testified to Maria's work ethic and kindness. Most meaningfully, Jake's daughters, Sarah and Emma, drove in from Dallas and Austin to support him. "Dad, we haven't seen you this happy since before Mom died," Sarah said. Emma nodded. "We always wanted a little sister. Better late than never." Meanwhile, Jake's attorney, Tom Harrison, uncovered disturbing reports about Maria's foster placement. Her foster father had previously been investigated for misconduct with minors. No charges were filed. But the pattern was concerning. The family also received sizable monthly payments from the state, suggesting Maria was more income than responsibility. The night before the hearing, Jake called Maria. She was anxious. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if they don't believe me again?" Jake's voice was firm. You're not that same scared girl anymore. You're stronger now, and you're not alone. The family court hearing was held in a plain, windowless room. Judge Patricia Hernandez, known for fairness and a heart for children, presided. Maria testified first. Her voice trembled as she recounted the neglect and emotional abuse she faced in multiple foster homes. But when she spoke of the ranch, her posture changed. Her voice grew stronger, eyes brighter. Mr. Sullivan didn't just save my life, she told the judge. Gave me hope. He treats me like family. The foster parents' attorney attempted to discredit her, labeling Maria a troubled teen. But Dr. Martinez's medical records backed up Maria's claims. Her truth rang too clear to be ignored. Jake took the stand, speaking from the heart. I may not have formal training in child care, but I raised 2 daughters and 2 strong women. Maria deserves love, stability, and a real home. I want to give her that. Sarah and Emma spoke next, expressing their full support for their father and their growing love for Maria as their sister. Their words proved Jake wasn't acting out of impulse, but deep commitment. The most powerful testimony came from Mrs. Rodriguez, Jake's neighbor, and a retired social worker. I've rarely seen a child flourish like Maria has with Mr. Sullivan, she said. This is where she belongs. The foster family's attorney made a final push, warning against bending procedure to favor individuals with resources. But the weight of evidence and testimony told a clearer story. After a short recess, Judge Hernandez delivered her decision. Her voice was steady, her gaze warm. This case involves a child who has experienced significant trauma, but has also shown incredible resilience. I see the transformation in you, Maria, she said. When you spoke of Mr. Sullivan, you became confident, hopeful. The judge granted temporary guardianship to Jake, pending a full home study. Maria was to be released to his care immediately. Tears welled in Maria's eyes as she hugged. Jake, the judge added conditions: parenting classes, home inspections, and continued education and therapy for Maria. Jake agreed without hesitation. As they left the courthouse, Maria whispered, I just want to go home. Jake smiled. Then let's go home. The 3-hour drive to the ranch felt like minutes. When they arrived, the crew had organized a surprise welcome-back dinner, complete with Maria's favorite meal and a handmade banner. Welcome home, Maria. She choked back happy tears. For the first time, she felt like she belonged. That evening, sitting on the porch under a fading sunset, Jake handed her a small wrapped box. I had this made for you, he said. Inside was a wooden nameplate. Maria Sullivan. She traced the letters slowly, smiling. Maria Sullivan, she repeated. I love how that sounds. Over the next several months, Maria blossomed. She enrolled in the local high school and quickly proved herself smart, driven, kind. She joined the agricultural club, impressed teachers, and made friends. Jake fulfilled every court requirement: parenting classes, regular visits, and full cooperation with social services. The home study praised the safe, loving, and stable environment he'd built. His daughters visited often, helping Maria adjust and embracing her as part of the family. Maria thrived at the ranch, especially with the animals. She had a knack for training horses and eagerly learned the business side of operations. Jake, in turn, found renewed energy and purpose. His home, once filled with silence and memory, now rang with laughter again. The loneliness that had haunted him since his wife's death lifted, replaced by connection and hope. Maria's therapy helped her process her past, time and guidance. Her nightmares lessened. She became not only stronger but joyful. Her bond with Sarah and Emma deepened. They introduced her to family traditions, took her shopping, and talked for hours like real sisters. She finally had what she'd never dared to hope for: a family that loved her unconditionally. As the 1-year anniversary of the day Jake found Maria approached, both looked back at all that had changed. What had started as a desperate rescue in the desert had turned into something deeper: healing, family, belonging. Jake stood beside Maria on the porch one evening, looking out at the horizon. You know, he said, Taking you in was the best decision I've made since your mother and I bought this ranch." Maria smiled, her eyes misty. "And you saved me, Jake. But more than that, you showed me how to live again." There was no question. Now this wasn't temporary. This was home. And she was, without a doubt, a Sullivan. 2 years after the court hearing, Maria stood in the same courthouse wearing a beautiful blue dress that Sarah and Emma had helped her pick out.
Oh.
But this time, she wasn't a frightened teenager fighting for her freedom.
Oh.
Young woman about to officially become Maria Sullivan through legal adoption. The final adoption hearing was a celebration rather than a battle. Judge Hernandez, who had followed Maria's case closely, smiled warmly as she reviewed the glowing reports from social workers, teachers, and counselors. Maria had not only survived her traumatic past, but had flourished in ways that exceeded everyone's expectations. "Maria, when I first met you 2 years ago, I saw a broken young girl who had lost hope," Judge Hernandez said from the bench. "Today, I see a confident young woman who has overcome incredible challenges and built a bright future for herself. Your transformation has been remarkable." Jake sat in the front row with his daughters, Carlos, Dr. Martinez, and Mrs. Rodriguez, all of whom had become Maria's extended family over the past 2 years. Watching Maria stand confidently before the judge, Jake remembered the frightened, starving girl he had found collapsed in his driveway and marveled at how far she had come. "Mr. Sullivan," the judge continued, "you have provided Maria with exactly what she needed: stability, love, and the chance to discover her own potential. The reports from her teachers, counselors, and social workers all indicate that this placement has been extraordinarily successful." Jake nodded, feeling proud, but also humbled by the journey they had traveled together. "Your Honor, Maria has given me just as much as I've given her. She brought joy and purpose back into my life when I needed it most." The judge's gavel came down with finality, officially making Maria a member of the Sullivan family. As applause filled the courtroom, Maria ran to Jake and threw her arms around him, both of them crying tears of joy and relief. "Welcome to the family, officially," Jake whispered in her ear. "I love you, daughter." "I love you too, Dad," Maria replied, using the word that had become natural to her over the past year. The celebration continued at the ranch, where Carlos had organized a barbecue for all their friends and neighbors. Maria looked around at the faces of people who had become her chosen family and felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the second chance she had been given. During her valedictorian speech at high school graduation 3 months later, Maria told the story of how she had found her family in the most unlikely circumstances. She spoke about the importance of not giving up hope even in the darkest moments, and how sometimes the people who save us are the ones who need saving too. 2.5 years ago, I was a girl with no family, no home, and no future, Maria said to the packed auditorium. Today, I'm surrounded by the most loving family I could ever imagine. And I'm heading to college to study veterinary medicine so I can come back and help run our ranch. Jake sat in the audience with tears streaming down his face, remembering the day he had almost lost hope of ever feeling useful or needed again. Finding Maria had reminded him that there was still so much good he could do in the world. Maria had received a full scholarship to Texas A&M University's veterinary program, but she had chosen to attend the satellite campus closer to home so she could continue helping with the ranch on weekends. Her dream was to become a large animal veterinarian and eventually take over the ranch's livestock breeding program. The summer before college, Maria and Jake worked together to expand the ranch's horse training operation. Maria's natural gift with animals had developed into genuine expertise. Several neighboring ranchers had begun bringing their horses to her for training. She was building a reputation as someone who could work miracles with difficult or traumatized animals. "It's like you understand what they're feeling," Jake observed one day as he watched Maria gently work with a horse that had been abused by its previous owner. "You have a gift for healing broken things." Maria smiled as she stroked the horse's neck, feeling the animal begin to relax under her touch. "I guess I know what it feels like to be scared and not trust anyone. Sometimes you just need someone to be patient with you until you remember that not everyone is going to hurt you." Jake understood exactly what she meant. They had both been broken when they found each other, Maria by abuse and abandonment, Jake by grief and loneliness. But together, they had created something stronger and more beautiful than either could have achieved alone. As Maria prepared to leave for college, she and Jake had many conversations about the future of the ranch. Jake was 60 now and starting to think about slowing down, but he wasn't ready to retire completely. The plan was for Maria to gradually take on more responsibility as she completed her education, eventually becoming a full partner in the operation. "This place has been in the Sullivan family for 3 generations, Jake told her one evening as they walked through the pastures checking on the cattle. "I can't think of anyone I'd rather pass it on to than you." Maria felt the weight of that. Trust and responsibility. But also the excitement of knowing she would have a meaningful role to play in preserving Jake's family legacy. The ranch that had given her a home would always be her home, no matter where life took her. On the last night before Maria left for college, she and Jake sat on the front porch, as they had countless times before, watching the stars appear in the vast Texas sky. They talked about everything and nothing, both aware that this marked the end of one chapter of their story and the beginning of another. "Dad," Maria said, using the title that never failed to make Jake's heart swell with pride, "I know I never. Gotta thank your wife Margaret for raising such an amazing man. But I hope she knows how grateful I am that you were the one who found me that day." Jake smiled, thinking about his beloved Margaret and how much she would have loved Maria. "Think she does know, sweetheart. And I think she had something to do with making sure our paths crossed when we both needed each other most." Maria squeezed Jake's hand as a shooting star streaked across the sky above them. "Do you think she would approve of me carrying on the Sullivan name?" "Maria," Jake said firmly, "Margaret always believed that family was about love, not blood. She would be proud to call you her daughter, just like I'm proud to call you mine." As Maria drove away the next morning to start her college adventure, Jake stood in the driveway waving until her car disappeared over the hill. He felt the familiar pang of missing someone he loved, but this time it was different from the grief he had known after losing Margaret. This was the bittersweet pride of a father watching his daughter begin her own independent life. Jake knew that Maria would be back for weekend visits, holidays, and summer breaks. But more importantly, he knew that she would be back permanently after graduation, ready to help him run the ranch and continue the Sullivan family tradition of working the land and caring for animals. The girl who had collapsed in his driveway, starving and alone, had grown into a strong, confident woman with a bright future ahead of her. And the lonely widower who had saved her life had discovered that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to save you right back. As Jake walked back toward the house, he could hear the horses nickering in the pasture and smell the familiar scents of hay and leather that had surrounded him his entire life. The ranch felt different now, not empty and echoing with memories of loss, but full of hope and anticipation for all the good things still to come. Maria Rodriguez had become Maria Sullivan, and in doing so, she had transformed not just her own destiny, but the destiny of everyone who loved her. Some families are born, but the best families are often the ones we choose and create through love, commitment, and the courage to open our hearts to unexpected possibilities.